Hey, everybody. Welcome to the official Do Good Better podcast. My name is Patrick Kirby. I am your host. I'm helping you as the small and medium-sized nonprofit do more good, raise more money, and we're coming up here on the fourth quarter. It is the most wonderful time of the year. It is also the most stressful time of the year. Most of our revenue at nonprofits comes in the fourth quarter, which means your budgets are looking a little bit hairy. And we've got a lot of work to do to inspire donors to give, inspire our businesses to open up their checkbooks, and that can put a lot of mental stress on all of us in the fundraising world. And again, life expectancy within the nonprofit world, 18 months as a development director, it's still the same thing. The burnout is real. So we're going to counter that today. In fact, we were going to address a lot of things as far as mental wellness goes. Of course, I'm going to bring the best experts to you, my dear audience. I got Lamar Hill here. He is the founder of 4 Elements Therapy. He's a dad. He's an author. He's a mental health expert here, and that we're going to talk about it today. Lamar, welcome to the official Do Good Better podcast.
Oh, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad to be here and support the mission and the direction of what you're doing, and hopefully provide some perspective and some motivation for everybody out there. So
I know you will, and because it's a topic that I think a lot of our nonprofit friends think about, but they don't maybe act upon, thinking about their own mental health first. We're giving human beings. We want to give more than we receive. And then sometimes we don't take care of ourselves first, or we don't really realize what's going on. So we're going to take a stop to that today. We're going to talk about that. But first, somebody's scrolling through iTunes, or they're going through Spotify, and they say, well, this is an interesting episode I need to listen to, but they have no idea who you are, Lamar. So if you would indulge us, could you give kind of a 5,000-foot view of who you are, what you do, and why we're talking today?
Okay. Yeah. So like you said, I'm Lamar Hill. I am a biracial male. I identify as male. I'm African American and Native American. I am enrolled member in the 3 affiliated tribes, the Fort Berthold Reservation in north central North Dakota, Arikara specifically. And so I grew up in foster care in central North Dakota, north central North Dakota. So I'm very, very much familiar and aware of kind of the agricultural Midwest lifestyle. And so grew up in foster care. Fortunately, was able to stay in one home from the time I was just, probably 3 to 4 years old. And to this day, the family's still my family. The parents are still my parents. And so that's been a blessing for me. So I went to college, did my undergrad at University of Marion social work, did my graduate work at the U of M for clinical social work. Been a couple of different places, and then right as the pandemic was just kicking off is when I opened up my doors officially and started my own private practice, 4 Elements Therapy, which the 4 elements and how it's designed is meant to symbolize kind of the medicine wheel concept, kind of drawing from my the Native American kind of culture and kind of the side that really kind of draws me, right? I think I feel and think a lot from my kind of more traditional Native American side of things. And so the 4 elements is representative of the 4 elements of that we represent in ourselves. So it's our physical health, our spiritual health, our emotional health, and our intellect. So it's the 4 elements of kind of who we are. And that's kind of how I want to practice kind of much more holistic kind of approach, where we're not just talking about just your emotional health, right? We're talking about all things, right, that can affect us, right? If our physical health isn't good, that's going to have an impact on every other part of our being, and likewise, if we're not feeling fulfilled in the jobs that we're doing, right? That kind of intellect, right? If we're not expanding, if we're not motivating others, if we're not being inspired, right? Those things can have a negative kind of impact on our mental health and our overall health too, right? If we're not feeling like we're contributing or we're doing what we're supposed to do, right? Then all of a sudden we start kind of losing direction and lose motivation, right? And then our mental health can become unbalanced.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to start with sort of intellectual health.
Mhm.
I think as a nonprofit leader, making sure that we're top of our game and understanding that we're making a difference, I think is really important to maintain our enthusiasm for what we do. And sometimes we forget what that impact is. And then we're not either challenged or we're too challenged. And then we just sort of throw up our hands and then say, I'm just going to compartmentalize. I'm going to do this one thing and I'm going to forget about everything else. I'd love you to dive a little bit more into what intellectual health that's so important and what we can do to remind ourselves on taking time to taking care of that.
Mhm. Well, I think the intellectual health, right, or the kind of the stimulus part of our being, right, is it's kind of why do we do what we do, right, and what are we contributing, right? What's kind of our purpose, right? Um, and again, and part of that in the realm of mental health is about education, right? You know, how much do we know, right? How much are we understanding of our mental health? How much are we understanding of how our intellectual being impacts, you know, our overall health, right? Kind of like what I was just talking about before, right? If we're not, you know, like you said, if we're tasked to do too much or you know, we don't have proper direction in kind of what we're doing, or we don't have clarity of kind of vision, you know, we can kind of get lost in it, right? And we can kind of throw up our hands and then we can kind of get burnt out, right? Or we get cynical, right, of the process. And so that intellectual health is to me is really about, you know, one is how am I contributing? What is my legacy, so to speak, right? And how can I, in any position that I am, how can I maintain, you know, balance in my life, whether it's for myself and my family, whether it's for myself and the people that I lead at work, whether it's even somebody that, you know, I'm having an exchange with, you know, as I'm buying coffee, you know, and having that, you know, hey, how are you doing? Right? You know, I appreciate you, right? So kind of going in that and having a sense of purpose in terms of why am I here? What is my sense and purpose doing here? How do I educate myself so that I can help others, right? So that's in kind of a really quick circular kind of way. That's kind of how I look at intellectual health and well-being.
I think a lot of people will overstress at the idea of thinking about what their legacy is, especially when you're in the grind every single day trying to just play catch up. But I love what you said about because that legacy as a word is massive, right? What is your legacy? What's going to be on your tombstone? How people are going to talk about it. But really what you said is beautiful. It's what are you doing to buy somebody a cup of coffee and asking them how they're doing?
Yeah.
If you become that person who's genuinely interested in somebody, who's genuinely curious about knowing about others, right? And as fundraisers, that is what our mission is, right? We're genuinely asking questions and being curious about what they like and what they don't like, what their passions are. And then your attitude of gratitude. Are you the most grateful human being? Did you say thanks a lot? Did you write that extra note? It's interesting about how people keep thank you cards. I know I do all the time. I got a big stack of them right there. And I go back to it just to kind of, just to feel good about if I'm having an off day, I'm reading thank you notes and go, I know what I'm talking about. But that's the type of legacy that I think you can reflect upon to help with your intellectual health. Mm-hmm. Is those small things that make you don't think they're making massive difference, but I'll tell you what, they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and can I share a quick story just in kind of what I generally tend to do? So I share this. So what happens, you know, oftentimes, right, when you go through like a drive-through or you go through like a customer service kind of an exchange, right? Every once in a while you'll run into a person who is working, right? And they're just kind of just cold, right? Just really jaded, really just kind of having a bad day, clearly, right? And oftentimes, right, as a customer, when you kind of get this, you know, this coming at you, right, and you're like, what did I do, right? We might either kind of match it with kind of the same kind of intensity and kind of energy, and then it kind of escalates, right? Then it kind of turns into this thing. Or what I've started to do is I've started to deliberately say, hey, Are you having a good day? And I'm confident in saying 9 times out of 10, that will disrupt whatever's going on with him in a positive way. Because then the interaction turns into, oh my gosh, like, hey, oh yeah, it's, this is maybe going on, or, thank you for asking. Right? And it completely turns around the dynamic and the interaction that we have. All of a sudden, now they're friendly, right? Now they're kind of trying to go the extra mile to let you know in their own way that they kind of appreciate you generally saying, hey, how are you doing, right? Rather than just saying, ugh, like, why are you being so nasty, right? And you're just saying, hey, how are you doing? How's your day going, right? And 9 times out of 10 that I do that, it completely turns it. Now, I don't know what happens when I leave, right? But I know for that moment, right? They felt a genuine connection with me that, hey, that I generally wanted to kind of help change the day around. That I noticed that, hey, looks like you're kind of having a tough day, right? And I kind of want to just check in with you just real quick, right?
I think one of my personal challenges, and I think a lot of people who are in the fundraising world have this type of personality, which is they shoulder everyone else's either anger, frustration, or sadness on themselves. It must be, I must have done something wrong, or what did I do? What can I do to make amends? Or, well, how can I help? You're constantly helping. When I need to constantly remind myself that it's not about me. This is not me thing, right? But in my positivity, how can I maybe, like you said, disrupt what it is? But I find myself shouldering a lot of the anger or frustration that others have, and I'll just take it on myself, which is horribly burdensome, by the way. And I have the constant reminder, and it's difficult to do, especially as a helper, is to remind yourself that this is not your fault. This is not about you, but maybe how can you help so that you're not shouldering it, but how can you maybe lessen whatever else is going on with somebody else?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a rough road to do that.
Yeah, it is. And I get that asked all the time is how do you do your therapy? Like, I don't know if I could be a therapist and then bring that home every day. And it's like, well, it's like anything, right? It's something that you have to kind of learn, right? And you go through it, and it's not for everybody. Just like, teaching isn't for everybody, right? Yep. I mean, it's not for everybody. I mean, so for me, I guess how I've tried to really manage my balance and making sure that I'm not taking all this stuff on, right? Is, there's a couple of things that I try to maintain in perspective, right? It's one is, legacy is huge, right? And it's kind of the end of time, right? It's, then we reflect. But to me, I kind of try to think about it as day to day. Like, did I kind of leave it out on the court today? Did I leave it all out in the field today, right? Did I do what I could do in my circle, so to speak, to help, change, to help support somebody or organization? Because I do consulting too. So did I do what I could today to help, to support, to inspire change, to inspire motivation, right? To inspire kind of creativity. And if I did, and so those are kind of my benchmarks that help me kind of maintain that focus on legacy, right? Is what did I do today? Right? Because we can get really overwhelmed with the bigger picture of everything that has to change, whether from the systems to the political climate to everything, right? I mean, there's so many things that we could really change and need to probably change, right? But that can't be done with one swing of the bat, the mighty Casey bat, right? It's, it's kind of small ball. And so I try to maintain my legacy perspective every day by, at the end of the day, when I shut the lights off to my office and I hit that door frame, like, hey, today I did what I could do, right? And hopefully every day that I can do that, the people that I interact with, they can start to kind of do that, right? And they can kind of start to kind of ripple out and have that same kind of mentality for themselves in their own kind of world, in their own space, right? So whether it's somebody that I'm working with in therapy, or somebody that I'm working with as far as my coworker or my intern, whether it's my kids, whether it's that barista at Starbucks that's having a hard day, it's what can you do today, right? Did you leave it all out in the field today? As far as what you can do.
going off of that, I think a lot of folks who work in the nonprofit world have unreasonable expectations of themselves on what they can accomplish. And so at the end of the day or the end of the week, I think a lot of us look back and go, I didn't do exactly what I needed to do. And I left a lot of money on the table. I left a lot of conversations on the table. I myself, as a business owner, I left a lot of business on the table that I just didn't get to because either I had something else come up, I just wasn't motivated to do so. And now I've got this horrible either business guilt, nonprofit guilt, fundraising guilt left that I didn't give it my all. How do you overcome that hurdle to reset for the next day or the next week, even though it's in the back of your head, it's just like, God, I messed up, or meant for me, and nobody else knows, but I did internally, and I can't get over that. And I think a lot of fundraisers sometimes have this in the back of their brain. Is there some techniques or are there some thoughts that you can give to compartmentalize? Everybody does it. It's okay. Have grace, move on kind of things.
Yeah. I think part of it is, part of what I do, and sometimes it's more or less, is a lot of times after work, I'll get home, right? And I'll shower, right? So I kind of do like this kind of ritual kind of, I'm going to shower kind of some of this stuff off me, right? That's not mine to carry, right? Or even if it is, right, then I'm just going to hate, like that's today, right? Today. And so part of this is to kind of engage in maybe some sort of, kind of a positive kind of ritual kind of thing to kind of help get your mind, in your body kind of engaging in some sort of, kind of activity that symbolizes kind of a reset, right? Kind of symbolize like, hey, we're going to decompress now, right? So finding out whatever that is, whether it's going out and taking a walk, right? Whether it's, engaging with your family, whatever it is, we're going to the gym, right? Taking a shower, reading, finding something that can kind of decompress you, right? Giving yourself grace, understanding that, hey, yeah, there's, you could have all the time in the world and you still probably won't get to some of these things that you want to get to every day, right? And that's okay, right? The other thing, that I hear you talking about when you say about the back of the head piece is, when we're thinking about this is we actually need to bring those things to the forefront, right? We actually need to talk about those things, right? We're not immune, right? I mean, people kind of look at us as like, we're out there and we're, 24/7 and this is our job. And then, we're here and we took on this, this mantra to help and support and make change and do all those things, right? But yeah, hey, we're people too, right? And we have our insecurities and we have our doubts and and everything in between. And so I think one of the things is being able to talk about that, and connecting yourself with people who you find that supports and who you can support and get behind, who can get behind you and support you in terms of, hey man, like, I really kind of botched this consulting gig that I had the other week, man. And, I don't know if I'm cut off for this. And, I don't know if this is my thing. But, then being able to talk about that and express that with somebody, right? And saying, hey, I'm not perfect, right? And I do have off days, right? And so not being afraid, not being ashamed, not being embarrassed to recognize and to admit that, hey, I have some insecurities and I do have some fears, right? And I do have some guilt and shame about the work that I do that I can and can't get done, and being able to verbalize that and have people around you support you. Again, it's invalidate that, man. It's validating, right? That's everybody.
Part of the insecurities piece, I think, in the nonprofit world, especially, is the idea that we don't celebrate at all because we think it's bragging. And I've been just harping on this for years. Yeah. But part of that mental health and that mental wellness is looking back at all the stuff that you did that's positive. And we close it off right away because it's always, we're moving on to the next task. We're moving on to the next. There's always something more to do, more to raise, more to get. How important is it to just look back and go, look at where we came from, for God's sakes? This is just remarkable. And how do you celebrate those wins without feeling like you're patting yourself on the back and being, look at how good I am?
Yeah.
Because that's a hard balance, especially with nonprofit leaders. We don't like talking about it.
Well, I use a lot of metaphors and I'm a terrible drawer. And I have a whiteboard in my office, right? And so I use really kind of just rudimentary kind of drawings, right? To talk about just this, right? And we talk about it in terms of goal, of setting goals and accomplishing goals, right? So I'll draw a mountain, right? Or a couple of peaks, right? And so at the very top one, right, that's the ultimate goal, right? That's the thing that you wanted to set out and accomplish, right? But, this is where we're starting at the base of camp, right? And we're not going to get from here to here, right? Today, tomorrow, next week, next month, right? So we want to set our sights kind of like when people go and hike mountains and scale mountains, right? They don't just go straight to the top, right? They kind of get to a point, right? And then they reestablish base camp, right? And they reestablish base camp to rest, right? To feed themselves nourishment, right? To get an idea of kind of where they are as far as their equipment and their resources and what they need. But also then to kind of turn around and look and say, holy smokes, look how far we just came, right? Look how far we just came, right? So it's a good time to reflect, right? So being able to look back and say, hey, we're not be like, hey, we made it. No, but this is a good time to rest. This is a good time to gain strength, to reflect, to look and say, hey, holy smokes, look how far I've come, right? But the job's still not done, right? So we got to be able to hold, hey, we still got work to do with, man, we've done a lot of work to get here. Right. And so it's really kind of having that perspective of balance, right? Like, yes, we still got, there's always work to do, right? But holy smokes, we need to look at just kind of all the work that we've done, right? And just kind of look down that mountain and say, holy smokes, like we just traveled that far, whether that was getting that grant, right? Whether that was partnering, whether that was collaborating, right? Whether that was getting those reports to the state complete, right? Like, and on time, right? And so those are the things, like to your thought is, yeah, we need to celebrate those things, but we also need to kind of keep an eye on, where we're going, right? And now we're strong enough to for the second leg of our trip or our journey, right? And so that's kind of how I tend to kind of think about celebrating reflection with, again, we still got to kind of keep an eye on where we're going. And not to say that it's not going to change between now and then, but we don't want to go back, right? We don't want to fall down there. We might kind of slip a little bit, right? But our goal is to not completely fall down, right? And start over, right? So I don't know if that answers your question much.
It totally does. And I think from a mental picture, it's just brilliant to that base camp thing. Because even with the word base camp, you're thinking like, oh, I'm at the bottom of this thing. No. Base camp is halfway up the damn mountain. It's right before all the hard stuff happens, but you got so far up there. So this leads me to another question too. And I think a lot of nonprofits have this in the back of their brain, which is they have this problem comparing themselves to others. Mm-hmm. So let's just take your base camp and your climbing example, right? So we're at base camp, we're looking and reflecting about how far we've come. We're getting our supplies ready. We see the top of the hill. We're already seeing other people at the top of the mountain, mm-hmm. or we're seeing somebody get up there quicker than we did. Or we're seeing somebody else who has accomplished more than we are accomplishing. And now we're having this sort of like, well, I don't know how to do that. That's not fair that they got this. Mm-hmm. This comparison to others' successes, and then using you're reflecting back, like, well, we don't have enough resources. We don't have we didn't get to hike and train for 6 years. We didn't get to do any of this stuff. And now it becomes self-defeating, mm-hmm. of saying, well, I'll never get to that point. Why should we even try as hard since we know we're never going to get there? That is a mental hurdle that I think brings people back to like, well, let's just do what we've always done, because that's a lot easier, because we'll never achieve what this organization or this person or this business leader has done. That's a challenge in itself to get over that hurdle.
It absolutely is. It's that self-talk, right? It's that, that kind of defeatist behavior. And how do you, whether it's working with one individual in my office or an organization that kind of has this, like this doom and gloom, just kind of not, you can kind of feel the energy in the air, right? And I always try to bring it back to, again, why is it that you do what you do? Let's kind of reset this, right? And let's kind of reflection, right? This is where you are. This is what you're struggling with, right? And again, I'm just kind of curious as to know is why are you doing what you do? What brought you into this to begin with, right? Whether it's therapy, whether it's an organization wanting help with, a change in the culture or something traumatic has happened and it's affected the entire agency, right? It's again, why are you doing what you're doing? What brought you into this, right? Let's talk about that again, right? Let's remember, the things that have brought you into being a teacher, to being a therapist, to being a parent, right? To whatever position you're in. Why are you in this position, right? And it could be just off of that, hey, this is actually probably not where I want to be right now. Okay, good. At least now you're going to go some direction, right? At least you're going to go somewhere, right? Yep. You're just not going to be kind of stagnant, right? Or it's kind of helping them kind of reinvigorate and re-energize themselves in terms of that's right, that's why I'm doing this, right? And if it's not me, then who? Kind of that cliche, right? If it's not you, then who? And so I really try to kind of get back to why are you doing this? Again, we can get distracted by all these other things that people are doing, right? That's just something that we have. That's just reality, right? Somebody's always doing something a little bit greater than what we want to be doing, right? So how do we maintain focus on what you're doing, right? And then how do we kind of keep your focus here? And every once in a while, when we get to base camp, now we can look and just kind of see where everything's at, right? Do some comparison, because competition and comparison isn't a bad thing either, right? It's a form of motivation, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But if you spend too much time investing in what other people are doing and not enough in what you're doing, right? That's where you get kind of caught up in that cynical, like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Well, you can maybe choose to not put so much time and investment into, thinking about it, talking about what everybody else is doing. Right?
Well, the other thing too is if you're a board member, if you're an executive director, why did you join in the first place? What on earth got you started at this nonprofit? Remembering why you started is similar to why on earth are you here? That you said. And then the other thing too, and maybe the perspective that you can start with is if your organization goes away, if you fail to exist, what happens? What impact that you are making in the community disappears in a whim. Yeah. And then that gives you the confidence almost to look back and go, oh, there are a lot of people that rely on us and we do awesome work. Mm-hmm. And it's that almost like, oh shit, if we don't do this and focus, a lot of others are relying on us and we're doing amazing things. Push. And that I think helps that mental anguish of like, I'm not doing enough, or I don't know what everybody else is doing. No, you're having positive impacts. Back to your coffee or your server, your barista moment where you're doing a lot. You're not looking at it from that perspective, but you're doing a lot. Yeah. And if you go away or you stop doing that, or you point back and go, hey, stop acting like a jerk to me. Now you're feeding and perpetuating that sort of negative thing. That's on you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's not always these big moments, right? It's really about, where are those small moments that, where I'm not necessarily wearing my therapist hat, right? That I can have an impact on somebody's day, right? What are those moments? Just kind of reaching out to a friend and saying, hey, bro, hey, brother, man, I miss you. Just kind of thinking about you, right? Which is something that's kind of always been difficult for me, right? And I'm not one to necessarily always do those things, right? But I realize the importance of it. And so it's something that I try to incorporate into my life more, is being more intentional about trying to not always look for those huge moments, right? But just those small moments, right? Hey, man, miss you, brother. Hey, love you, dude. Thinking about you, right? And knowing how I feel when I get those, like, hey, man, well, I need to kind of, like your sign says, do good work and kind of help other people, not only just in the big moments, but the smaller moments too, which is what the book is about, by the way.
A wonderful transition. You've already, I was going for the super transition there and you nailed it out of the gate, which is wonderful because I wanted to talk about the book that you have, and it's called Are You My Daddy? It's a children's book. I would love yes. All right. For those of you watching on YouTube, there it is. And we'll put up a link. We'll make sure the link goes right to make sure you can get that. But let's talk a little bit about that because I think what we just got done talking about, the little things, whether it's the highlighting the little things, which are very big things. It's the bond between fathers and their children. It's happy memories. It's goodbyes. It's those aren't little things that you talk about. They're massive things done in little chunks. So talk to me a little bit about why and how the book came to be.
So Yeah, so the book, the birth of it was last October. And so I was visiting one of my best friends, and he's got four kiddos, and they're all like back to back to back to back. And three out of the four, kind of are have some disabilities, right? Some things going on. And so, and he's a divorced dad, right? So really young kids. And so I was visiting them, and we were just talking, and he had a neighbor that came over, and he was saying how he looked out the window one day and he saw, my buddy walking across the street with his four ducklings behind him, whatever. And he's carrying this, and he's an old offensive lineman too. And so he's carrying this tub of goodies, right? And it ended up being Scotch Roos. And he was just talking about, seeing this guy with these four kids, and I'm in my head, I'm imagining, because I know his kids a little bit, and like how interesting and how funny that would be to watch this happen, right? And so I kind of made this joke. I said, man, that could be a book. Like, Are You My Daddy kind of deal. And so we kind of laughed about it, right? And the next day we talked about it a little bit more, and then I went home. And then it kind of just stuck with me. And then I just started kind of just writing, and again, I don't know if you read the book or not, but there's not a lot of content in it, so to speak. But it was the scenes, the imagery, right? That I knew that was going to have to be the seller. Like it's getting folks to really understand and recognize emotion, right? And you can do that with words, right? But I think having the duo of visual imagery and then words, and not a lot of words, I think is very impactful. And so we started this, and Amanda McKinnon with Mint Branding is my marketer, and she got me hooked up with Jamie Trozen, who does illustrations. And I talked to her, and and I said, hey, my job is really easy. My job is essentially done, right? So you have the hardest job of really saying 1,000 words with just images, right? So the imagery and the expressions have to be like beyond on point, right? So she did a little bit of research, not much, and she came back and she nailed it. Like, I was like, perfect. You're it. Let's go. And then we just kind of started writing it, and it was a team effort. So I had Jamie Trozen, Amanda McKinnon, my executive assistant, boss lady, AKA Kirsten. She was there every step of the way. She's got a page in here that she kind of created for her own dad. And so everybody kind of had a part in kind of bringing this together, right? And kind of putting it together. And so if you look at it, everybody kind of, that I've talked to or made comments or like, I can't wait to read this story. And it's like, well, it's not necessarily a traditional story in terms of a front, middle, and the end. Each page really has kind of its own story within it, that my hope is that anybody who reads it, father or otherwise, can look at that particular page and kind of reflect back on a memory, right? Or times where they maybe felt that way, right? And so each page is kind of designated to reflect different, diversities, different scenarios. Like I have one in here with a dad and his child, and they're harvesting, right? Which is important because that's a big part of our life up in the Dakotas, in the upper Midwest, right? And it's the long hours, right? And it's grueling hours of doing this, right? And maybe I don't see my kids as much. Maybe I'm not involved in my family as much at this time, right? But to be able to share a moment with your child and say, this is kind of why I do what I do, because we get to feed people, right? And I'm honored to be able to feed people, right? And so every kind of page has its own unique, ability to tell its own story based off of how you want to reflect and interact with it, right? And maybe you don't, right? But I think if you really kind of take some time and you look at the imagery, you look and you kind of read the words and you think about it, I think it's going to have some sort of positive impact on you, especially as fathers, right? I think that's a huge thing for fathers to not only be more recognized, but also for fathers to step into being a father And no matter kind of what, situation or circumstances you have, right? Valuing and honoring our obligation and our privilege to be fathers, right? Is something that I think that we as fathers can do more of, right? And I think that we have the opportunity and the ability to make some changes, even in the family court system, in regards to kind of how things are set up, right? And that's kind of maybe a benchmark down the road, right? That could be a springboard off of this book, right? In terms of some of the justice stuff when it comes to, fatherhood and kind of the family systems in terms of how we look at, our kids, better off with moms or dads, and then kind of how do we look at that system. So, because that system right there has a lot of impact on how fathers interact with their kids. Right? You get some fathers who are just really, really just burned and upset, right, about the fairness of it, right? And so as a result, they can't get past the court system feelings or that feelings with their ex-partner. So they just kind of disengage, right? And when you disengage, now we're missing out on these moments, these small moments that we need to have with our kids and that our kids need to have with you as fathers. So.
Well, I think again, as a dad, I always am drawn towards books that have a dad theme to it. And there's not a lot. I mean, there's not a ton, right? So it's not like you're a part of it and you're reading, again, I like reading unicorn books and I like reading all these things, but I also love sort of like nerdy high fantasy novels. So like Lord of the Rings and that kind of thing. Like I'm obsessed. And what I love about those books is that the words produce the arts in your brain. So you get to actually visualize what, the author is speaking about as far as what you envision the look of the castles or the landscape, et cetera. In this book, I love is that you're taking that and you're sort of reverse engineering with this. This is the art that you get to then draw out the story from. Yeah. And that sort of creative brain, that sort of high fantasy creative mind is still there. It's just reversing words to art. And I love that too. So there's like there's elements that I'm just drawn to on the same thing. And I just so appreciate taking it from concept to executing it and then just going all in on it. That type of entrepreneurship and book writing, I think is just a really cool thing too. So how do people get this book? How do they get their hands on it? Where can they find it?
So the book is solely on Amazon, right? And so you can, it's print to order basically. I think that's how Amazon works. And so it's print to order. It's on Amazon. It's like I said, it's great for dads. That was the original intent, but it did evolve into this. This book is actually just, it's good for moms to pick up and read, right? And maybe, whatever their circumstances is with the dad, right? And to maybe have some better insight or some perspective on, that, hey, as dads, we hurt, we have fears, we're afraid, we don't want our kids to be hurt, when our kids are hurt, we feel helpless at times, and so, and so to really kind of break down some of these gender kind of biases, right, and these gender kind of constructs, so then, people just kind of understand that, hey, man, as fathers, like we care, we love our kids, and whatever our circumstances are, is don't negate the fact that we do care, right? And there are so many examples of fathers not doing good things, but for every one example of that, there's 100 of fathers doing fantastic things, and doing them with really not much recognition other than just, you're supposed to do it. So, why do you need this pat on your back? Kind of going back to the nonprofit, right? This is what you're supposed to do, right? So why do we need to celebrate this, right? So no, that's not how that works, right? Yep. We all need to kind of pick me up. We all need a booster from time to time, and daily. And that's kind of what I hope this book kind of promotes, is that, we need to, especially during this time, we need to be more there for our kids, more available, and making sure that we are noticing and recognizing those small moments even more so than the big moments that we have.
Lamar, I cannot tell you how much I appreciated this conversation. I know that everybody who's listening is going to get a lot out of just sort of realigning themselves and taking a deep breath and saying, hey, a lot of others go through this too. And I think we need to figure out quicker than we normally do that everybody's going through something like this, especially in the nonprofit world. We're all on the same team. We're all in the same boat. We're all experiencing the same things. Take a deep breath. use some of Lamar's sort of conversation to sort of help get you in a better mindset, and then go to Amazon and buy the book. Go click on the links below, because we'll put all of that info in the show notes. Lamar, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Such great insight, super great motivational stuff. Cannot thank you enough.
I appreciate you having me on, and and again, thank you for what you do, and it's definitely needed too. So I appreciate that.
I love it. We'll talk to you next time here on the official Do Good Better podcast.